Welcome to LifePoint, a ministry focused on helping you find real life. Author and teacher of the gospel for over 30 years, Pastor Dell offers hope by guiding you step by step to the abundant life that God has for you. Let's join Pastor Dell now for LifePoint.
Welcome to LifePoint. I'm Pastor Dell Phillips. I'm your host here on LifePoint, and I want to say thank you for taking the time to share with us on our program today. As you should know by now, we are continuing our special Life in Israel series. I'm so excited because just earlier this year, I had my first opportunity to visit the Holy Land. I tell you, it was an experience of a lifetime. And so I'm taking time over the next several programs to simply share with you some personal nuggets of truth that I brought back with me. And I'm going to put my disclaimer out there again. I shared this in our first program, entering into this series, that I am in no wise claiming or even trying to imply that I am an expert on the land of Israel, an expert on the history of Israel. But I'm simply a first-time visitor who was so attentive. I took some notes that I feel impacted my life, and I simply want to pass some of those notes and revelations on to you as the viewers. So I want to give you an opportunity, for many of you that are out there who may have never visited the Holy Land, I want to give you an opportunity to see it from the eyes of a first-time visitor and simply just share some things that I believe are relative to our day-to-day life here where we are right now. So I want you to get ready to share with us as we go to our journal reading today. The journal reading here is going to set the stage for what we're going to see a little bit later. God comes down so we can rise up. This is something that was very profound to me while in the Holy Land. Because the land of Israel, the topography of the land of Israel, or I should say even more specifically, the distinctive difference in the topography is that all the land that surrounds Jerusalem is lower than the land or than the area of Jerusalem where the temple of God would be. You're going to understand why that's so important a little bit later in our program. But we're going to go for a break, and when we come back, we'll share with you our theme scripture and also a very important announcement concerning what we're doing while we're sharing in our special Israel series. We'll be back after this message.
Many of us have spent years roaming down curious paths looking for our destiny. In our quest to satisfy our desire for happiness and our need for fulfillment, we have meandered down many different paths that it seems in times that we have lost our way. Now we are not sure of what we want. We don't quite know what would make us happy or content. We need help. We need directions. We need someone to point us to the single distinct path that leads to real life. This interactive DVD and workbook is designed to help you find the path that leads to real life. Order now so you can begin a new path and start getting the most out of life today. Workbook and interactive DVD are available online now for a ministry donation of $15 or more at www.lifepoint4.me. or write to us at LifePoint Ministries, P.O. Box 201334, Denver, Colorado 80220.
All right, I want you to take advantage of our DVD offer. As a matter of fact, I want to just say thank you to so many people who have started to tune in to LifePoint on the web, who've been engaged with us through our internet site. As you see there, this is where you can go and order our LifePoint products. And I want to encourage you to check us out on the web, www.lifepoint4.me, www.lifepoint4.me. That's an opportunity for you not only to see the products and the other ministry tools that we have available for you through LifePoint, but also to connect with us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. So take some time to check us out on the web, as you see there. During this special series, I want to make this available to you. We're going to give you a set of 4 DVDs that will comprise all the programs during our Life in Israel series, and that would normally sell for $60. We're going to discount that to $49 and $25 out of every set that we sell, we're going to give back to Sun Broadcasting. As we are going through our Life in Israel series, we are going to cross over into our 1-year anniversary. And I am so excited about that and grateful to all the viewers out there who have connected with us during this past year. But I'm really grateful to Sun Broadcasting. Without them, we could not make this program possible. It's because of their investment in this ministry that makes it possible to be on the air every week, and in many cases repeating several times during the course of the week. So I want to say thank you to them, and I'm asking you to join Pastor Dell, to join me in sharing our gratitude with them and to make a one-time donation to Sun Broadcasting. You can call the number that you see on the bottom of your screen right now or connect with them on their website and make a donation. Just earmark it in some kind of way if you can. Say, hey, Pastor Dell encouraged me to make a one-time donation to Sun Broadcasting. I would be so appreciative. Now, this is just something that God put on my heart. This is not a requirement or wasn't asked of me. I just felt led to do this to show my gratitude for their support. And I want them to know how much I appreciate the staff and the leadership at Sun Broadcasting for making LifePoint available to you. So I want you to go to the phones and share your support with them today. All right. So now listen, we're going to engage in another episode of Life in Israel. And want to give one more shout out to Mama Rose out there in case you missed the previous program. Rose is one of the many people that I was able to join out there in our excursion to Israel. She too was a first-time visitor, as was I, and we just connected in such a special way. She's been watching LifePoint almost since its inception, and I want her to know how much I appreciate you. Say hi, Mama Rose, and I'm looking forward to having a special New Mexican meal with you very soon. All right? Listen, I want you to go to our theme scripture for today. And I want you to take a look at this in your Bibles in the book of 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 3. Then shalt thou go on forward from thence. Note, forward from thence, and thou shalt come to the plain of Tabor, and there shall meet thee 3 men going up to God. I want you to pay attention to that. Going up to God to Bethel, one carrying 3 kids, and another carrying 3 loaves of bread, and another carrying a bottle of wine. We're going to stop right there for the moment. All right, 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 3. I want to set this up. In our journal, we shared with you, God comes down so we can rise up. God comes down so we can rise up. There's been this misinterpretation that we are trying to become elevated in the things of God. And I want to put a little different slant on that and allow us to see that what's really happening is God is coming to meet with us. And if anything, we are rising up to come into his presence. So I want you to hold on to that thought just for a moment. There's so many things are needed to share with you. So I need to reset the stage from where we were last week. I share with you that the land, Israel, its name is indicative of the presence of God, or I should say the name of God, Israel. The last 2 letters, E-L, represent the name of God. So the name of Elohim is actually incorporated into the name of Israel. So Israel becomes the land that is seated by God. I want to rehearse that because I want you to know what my very first impression was of the land. You know, first impressions are very significant. First impressions are just that. They leave a lasting impact on the participant. And I want to share my first impression getting off the airplane in Israel. Without any coaching, my first impression of the land, as it's referred to, was the sense of the presence of God. Physically having been in that place, that God physically had visited that geographical place, and that his presence was still latent in the atmosphere. No one told me that that was going to happen. No one suggested that I might have that sensation. I'm telling you, the moment I stepped off the plane, it was like I'm in a place that God has visited. And I have to tell you that no worship service that I've ever been in before in my church or anyone else's church can even equate to that experience of being in the place where God was present. As a matter of fact, perhaps one of the frustrating things is not being able to take that sensation back home, because unfortunately in church it appears as if we are trying to draw God in to our worship atmosphere, whereas in Israel it was totally the opposite. I was actually coming in unexpectedly to the place where God already dwelled, like coming into his backyard, if you will, and not knowing that I was going to run into him. It was an inescapable sensation that no matter where we were in the land, you could not escape the fact that God had been there. So this wasn't like in church trying to, get everybody all, riled up and trying to get people, into the spirit of worship and praise and whatever, as many of us as pastors or ministry leaders have to do on a weekly basis. It was coming in to where God already was. That was significant to me. And it's a very important point when we begin to look at our focus for today. This whole concept that God comes down so that we can rise up is largely based on the fact that this place geographically is the place God selected. He chose this location to be the place where he would dwell, and the people he had chosen would also reside. I want to page backwards a little bit to look at how all of that developed. I want us to just go back in biblical history and take a look at the path that led to what we have now labeled and identified as the Holy Land. Interesting, when we go all the way back to the book of Exodus, we are reminded about the story concerning Moses that God raised up to go into Pharaoh, into his courtyard, if you will, and to make a demand that Pharaoh would release the Hebrews that have been in captivity for over 400 years. He would release them. And it says very specifically in Exodus in chapter 5, verses 1 through 3. You can read and study this on your own. It says very specifically his claim to Pharaoh was that they must be released so that they could go out and meet with their God in the wilderness. Now, Moses was not just asking for them to be released from their physical bondage. The greater emphasis was placed upon the necessity of them being released from captivity because they had a meeting with God in the wilderness. I want to draw on that illustration just a little bit to show you the connection. God had identified a meeting place. It was not in Egypt. It was going to be in the wilderness. Now, I know that the children of Israel, they have been crying out to God for those 400 some odd years, asking God to release them from oppression. But let me tell you something. Their objective was not, God, come save us and rescue us and bring us to you. Their objective was simply to get out from underneath the heavy hand of oppression. That was their objective. Just get us out of this bondage, this captivity. We don't need to leave. We just want to get out of the captivity. Their objective was not to leave. Watch this. Their objective was not to leave Egypt. Their personal objective was simply to escape captivity. When we pay closer attention to some of the details in the Exodus story, we see that confirmation that even upon their exit, there was the question, maybe we should not have left. Once they saw the pursuit of Pharaoh's army as they were facing the Red Sea, we see some of them, looking over their shoulders, reminding one another of the leeks and the cucumbers and the other finer parts of life that they enjoyed while in captivity. So their objective was not to leave Egypt. Their objective was to escape oppression. But that was not God's objective. God's objective went beyond their captivity. God wanted to draw them out of the land where they were presently located to meet with him in the wilderness. You got to stay with me because this is going to be very relevant here in just a moment. So I want you to make a notation, mental notation, that the purpose for releasing them from captivity was so they could go and meet with God. Now watch this. They are released from Egyptian captivity. They set up the meeting tent, the tabernacle, if you will, in the middle of the wilderness. God, watch this, comes down to Mount Sinai, and the people are drawn to the mountain to see or meet with their God. Where? In the wilderness. That was the designated meeting place. Sinai, Mount Sinai, was the meeting place, the place God selected. Are you with me? The place God selected, said, hey, meet me here, not at Mount Jezreel, meet me at Mount Sinai. Why? Because that's where I'm going to be. You go Mount Jezreel if you want to, but I'm not going to be there. In order to have a meeting with me, you have to first be released to leave Egypt, to leave behind everything in Egypt, not just the captivity, but you also have to leave behind whatever benefits you thought you had in Egypt. You have to leave them behind, join the excursion, the journey to Mount Sinai. I'm going somewhere with this. Stay with me. So the meeting place, note that, was Mount Sinai. God comes down so that his people can come towards him. Watch this, watch this. As time moves forward, we discover in the book of that describes the kings, the lineage of David and Solomon, the book of Chronicles. It tells us in 2 Chronicles chapter 6, you can read this on your own, chapter 6, read that entire chapter, but specifically in verses 5 and 6, there's something interesting that we see in that passage where we discover that God has not chosen a city, a place to identify as his location in all of the land. So see, I want you to get a hold of this. If you joined us in the previous program last week, we identified in Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 11, it said that God selected this land, this place where he would watch over it day and night, care for it day and night. Before that happened, we see in 2 Chronicles chapter 6, verses 5 and 6 specifically, where God's speaking to Solomon. He says, all this time I have not chosen a location. So this is before the selection. God rehearses with Solomon, I've never chosen a place to put my name or to establish as a location in all of the earth or amongst all the tribes of Israel until now. Until this point, where Solomon builds a temple, a physical location, and God chooses and says, in that location, I will put my presence. Guess where that was? Jerusalem. That was the location. God says, this is the place that I will continue to meet with you and generations that will follow you, Solomon. I will place the kingship in the family of David, the lineage of David. And I will declare that this place shall be the place where I will be present. They brought in the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark was placed in the temple. The physical temple now would be comprised of three major chambers: the outer court, the inner court, and now the Holy of Holies. In the Holy of Holies, they would place this Ark of the Covenant because that was the transference of what they had carried in the wilderness. Now they would bring it to a stationary, fixed location. And God said, in this place, I will hover, I will literally, I'm not going to remain, watch me, I'm not going to remain in Mount Sinai or remain on the wandering path that led you from the wilderness to where you are now. I'm going to establish my presence in a fixed location. In the Holy of Holies, God would hover. His presence would be fixed there in Jerusalem. Watch this. First teaching point. When God chooses to change the location, guess what? You and I have to change with him. You can't say, oh, wait, God. I only know you in Mount Sinai. So, you gotta stay right here in this mountain. You got to stay right here in this area because that's where I was familiar with you. It was easier to experience you. There was plenty of room to wander, to roam in the wilderness, and we could still keep our eye on that mountain, Mount Sinai. But now, God, you're narrowing, watch this, you're narrowing the opportunity for me to relate to you. Now, instead of you giving us the mountain where we could see you from multiple directions, from anywhere out in the wilderness where we might be roaming as well, now you're saying we have to go to a fixed location in Jerusalem, narrowing the path of how we come to you. Interesting. Some of us don't like when God narrows our options. We don't like when God cuts back the options in our life. We have to recognize that straight is the gate, and narrow is the way that leads to life. Broad is the way that leads to destruction. When God decides to narrow the path, some of us get lost, some of us get left because we don't want to eliminate options. So now you have to transfer from the outer court to the inner court to the Holy of Holies. That's where the presence of God is. Now, but as incredible as that point is, there's something beyond that. Watch this. That becomes the fixed location, Jerusalem, the place of worship. I got to hurry. I got to get this in. Watch this. But after Solomon, there's a problem. Solomon disobeys God. We won't get into that. You can study that on your own. He disobeys God. He separates the kingdom. Divides the kingdom are the tribes of Israel. 10 and 2. 10 in the north, 2 in the south. Solomon only has jurisdiction over the 2 in the south. Here's the teaching point, though. But the southern kingdom is where Jerusalem is. The northern kingdom, the other 10 tribes, though they are larger and greater, they don't have the temple present there. Jeroboam is the king that is raised up to oversee the northern kingdom. But Jeroboam, because of his own personal insecurities, says, hey, we're not going all the way to the south to worship God. We're going to build our own temple in the north. Why should we have to go all the way to the Davidic kingdom to worship God? We can build temples just like they did. Here's the problem. You can't put God where he hasn't chosen to be. I don't care how grand the edifice might be. If God didn't select it, if God didn't ordain it, then you can't put him there. God says, I choose where I'm going to be present. I chose to meet the Hebrews at Mount Sinai because that's the place I ordained. I then allowed Solomon to build a temple, to erect an edifice for me. And I told him I would allow my presence to reside there. But you can't just decide to have, watch this, to have church where you want to have it, to have an experience with God where you desire to have it, and expect God to come and follow you. I got to get this corrected. God's not following you. God's not following me. We got to turn that around. We have to learn how to follow him. So when God moves from Sinai to Jerusalem, and even if God divides the territory of Israel, you still have to, watch this, travel. You got to travel from the north to get to the south. Now here's the last teaching point. I'm going to have to hold on to some of this to the next program. So I'm telling you right now, you got to tune in to the next program to get the full revelation of this. But now they will constantly have to leave their personal locations to go up and to meet with God. There's a special name that the Jews give to this journey of going up. I'm going to hold on to that till the next broadcast. But I want you to get this in your spirit, that we are constantly, or we should be constantly living every single day in a path that leads us up towards God. God comes down so that we can rise up to meet with him. God comes down so that he can bring his presence into our life. But we have to recognize where he is. Right now, you might be a little lost, wandering in your own personal wilderness, trying to get back on track. And you might have seen the options in your life narrowed down to what you feel is not sufficient for you. But I want you to see this truth, see this revelation, that though the path may be narrow, if you pay close attention, you'll discover that life exists inside of that narrow path. Call us at the number you see on the bottom of your screen. If you are struggling right now with trying to stay on track, I want our prayer partners to pray with you. Call us. We're standing by to take your call, to encourage you that God does have life available for you on that straight and narrow path. Now listen, as I told you at the top of the program, all the donations and contributions that come in during this Life in Israel series, we want to make a special donation to Sun Broadcasting. So contact them right now at the phone number you see at the bottom of your screen, or connect with them on their email website. This is Pastor Dale encouraging you to stay on the path that leads to real life, and make sure you tune in for next week's program as we continue our Life in Israel.
Thank you for joining us today on LifePoint for this exciting new ministry that will help you move beyond the obstacles that prevent you from living real life. To receive a copy of today's message, we invite you to visit us on our website at lifepoint4.me. You can order your CD today for just $10 or DVD for just $15. A study guide for today's teaching is also available for a donation of any amount. And be sure to follow us on Facebook for excerpts of upcoming teachings and dynamic devotionals. LifePoint is brought to you by the prayers and generous support of viewers like you. So we invite you to partner with us by sending your tax-deductible contribution to LifePoint, P.O. Box 201-334, Denver, Colorado 80220. Until then, we'll see you next time as we continue on our journey to real life.